We are going to talk about the gross domestic product for the first quarter of 2018. Let us look at what happened. Real GDP, that's quarter on quarter, fell by 2.2% in the first quarter of 2018. And of course, real GDP year on year for the first quarter 2018 increased by 0.8%. Now let us look at the growth rates for the GDP over time, and starting from around 2014 first quarter and moving straight to the first quarter of 2018. We will remember that in the last quarter of 2016, we had a negative growth at the time, but with more data coming in and more information coming in, and we went to look at our numbers and revise, which is allowed in a statistical practice, and we came back with a positive growth for that quarter. So that recession, the technical recession that we had spoken about at the time, has actually been superseded. That's why if you look at quarter 4 of 2016, it's now showing a positive growth, but otherwise quarter 1 of 2017 remains a negative growth, and the second, third, and fourth quarter of 2017 had recorded a positive growth, and of course now we are sitting at negative 2.2%. Now let us look at the industries. Primary industries have recorded a growth of negative 13.8%, and the secondary industries for the first quarter of 2018 have recorded a negative 4.9%, and tertiary industries are the ones that have had an increase of 0.3 of a percentage point of 0.3%. And those industries are the only ones that have come positive out of the 3 sets of industries. Now let us look at how the sectors have performed. Let us look at government sitting at a growth of 1.8%, and it has contributed 0.3 of a percentage point to the growth of the quarter. And of course, personnel services, 1.2, contributing 0.1 of a percentage point. Finance, 1.1 growth, and contribution sitting at 0.2 of a percentage point. And transport, 0.9, that is growth. And of course, the highest decrease was recorded in agriculture, which is sitting at a negative 24.2%. And of course, we will remember that agriculture comes from a high base. In the last 2 quarters, it had recorded relatively very high. And its contribution to this quarter's growth is negative 0.7 of a percentage point. And of course, that shrink is followed by the one in mining and manufacturing, both sitting at negative 9.9% and negative 6.4%. Now let us look at the sectors. The primary sector, we have already indicated that it has contracted by 13.8%, and agriculture by negative 24.2, and mining negative 9.9. But let us look at agriculture. The decreased production was reported for field crops and horticulture products. And of course, in mining, the decreased production was reported for gold and other metal ores, predominantly the platinum group metals and iron ore. Now let us look at the secondary sector. The secondary sector, as we have already reported, has dropped by 4.9%, and of course in manufacturing we have observed negative 6.4%, electricity negative 0.5%, and construction negative 1.9%. And let us look specifically what has happened there. The decline in manufacturing was driven largely by activities in the petroleum and chemical products and basic iron and steel. And of course, electricity production declined in the first quarter while the distribution of water increased. And let us look at construction. Residential buildings and construction works activities decreased in the first quarter. And this is vis-a-vis non-residential buildings that although they observed an increase, they couldn't actually offset the strength of the decrease in residential buildings and construction. Now let us look at the tertiary sector. The tertiary sector has seen a growth in trade, transport, finance, government, and of course in personnel services. But let us look at trade. Weaknesses in the trade as well as in catering and accommodation contributed to the decline. And of course, my apologies, I had said we have seen an increase in trade. Actually, in trade, we had a decrease of 3.1%. And of course, those were caused largely by catering and accommodation. And the others had registered a growth. And of course, in transport, which registered 0.9%, the activities related to land freight, transport, and transport support services in such areas that have increased. And in finance, the increases were insurance, real estate activities, and business services that contributed to the 1.1 rise. And of course, in government, the increase was public sector employment numbers that contributed to the rise in general government activities. And when you look at our report, you will see that in the first quarter, we had work that was done by the IEC, and it had brought in people to come and work, and in the process that contributed to this, as well as in the first quarter, we have observed that tertiary institutions do pull people who come and assist on temporary basis. So let us look at nominal GDP values for the first quarter. We are saying that the nominal GDP estimate is sitting at 1.184 trillion in the first quarter of 2018. And that is 24 billion less than the last quarter of 2017, that is quarter 4 of 2017. Agriculture was up by 10 billion to 25 billion, and of course electricity was up by 6 billion to 39 billion. Mining was down by 16 billion to 75 billion, and trade was down by 18 billion to 157 billion. Let us look at the share of nominal GDP for quarter 1, 2017. Finance is claiming 21%, government 18%, trade 15%, manufacturing 13%, transport 10%, and of course, construction and electricity are sitting at 4%, and agriculture is 2%. Now, let us look at the expenditure on GDP. We are saying that expenditure on GDP fell by 2.5% in the first quarter of 2018, quarter on quarter. And of course, the expenditure on GDP year on year rose by 1.7%, but we should remember that this comes from a low base. So if you remember in the previous slide, we had indicated that on the production side, we are sitting at 0.8. So certainly this comes from a low base. Now let us look at the expenditure on GDP growth rates over time. The trends are almost similar to those that we are picking up on the production side. If you look at quarter 1 of 2017, we have seen a contraction, and of course, in the production side, we are picking it up here, and the 3 quarters following that went on a rise, and of course, we have observed that as well in the production side, and certainly we are seeing a fall on the side of production as well as on the expenditure side. Let us look at the contribution of the sectors. And of course, as we look at them, look at household expenditure sitting at 1.5% with a contribution of 0.9%. And of course, government sitting at 1.2 with a contribution of 0.2 of a percentage point. And of course, we have seen the largest decrease was in exports on goods and services, sitting at negative 16.5% with a contribution of negative 5.2%, followed by imports on goods and services, which set at negative 6.5%, with a contribution of 2.1%. Now, let us look at household final consumption expenditure. And household final expenditure, we have already indicated it's sitting at 1.5% quarter on quarter for the first quarter of 2018. Now, let us look at the growth rates over time. We can see that with an exception of 2 quarters, and we are looking at from 2014 quarter 1, that is quarter 2 of 2015 and quarter 1 of 2016, that had recorded a negative growth, but otherwise the others had been going up and down over different quarters up to the current quarter of 2018 first quarter. Now let us look at what happened in the household final consumption expenditure. We are saying that furnishing household equipment rose at 6.1% and a contribution of 0.5 of a percentage point. And that growth was followed by the one that we have seen in miscellaneous goods and services at 5.9%, with a contribution of 0.7 of a percentage point. And of course, the negative growth, the largest decrease was observed in clothing and footwear, sitting at negative 6.9%, with a contribution of negative 0.4 of a percentage point, and of course followed by alcohol beverages, tobacco and narcotics, sitting at negative 1.6, and of course with a contribution of negative 0.1. Now, of course, food and non-alcohol beverages as well as recreation also observed a contraction in the first quarter of 2018. Let us look at household final consumption expenditure by durability. And we are saying that services increased by 4.2% with a contribution of 1.8, and non-durable goods 1.2% with a contribution of 0.5 of a percentage point, and durable goods saw a decrease of 0.6% with a contribution of negative 0.1. And of course, semi-durable goods are the ones that recorded the highest decrease at 6.7% with a contribution of negative 0.7 of a percentage point. Now, government final consumption expenditure sitting at 1.2% quarter on quarter for the first quarter 2017, and we can demonstrate how it has performed over time from first quarter of 2014 to the current first quarter of 2018. And let us look at gross fixed capital formation, which has recorded a decrease of 3.2% quarter on quarter for the first quarter of 2018. And then, of course, over time, we can see the fluctuations that have occurred over from the first quarter of 2014 up to the current first quarter of 2018. Now, let us look at asset types, how they have performed. Non-residential buildings have recorded the highest growth, sitting at 25.1% with a contribution of 1.9%. And of course, let us look at the highest decrease was registered in residential buildings. Such a decrease was sitting at 11.9% with a contribution of negative 1.1%. And of course, the other areas that have observed decreases are in transport equipment, machinery and other equipment, construction works, and other assets. Now, let us look at change in inventories. And change in inventories, we are looking at this in terms of the billions. And in the first quarter of 2018, we had recorded 11.633 billion. And of course, let us look at exports and imports. Exports of goods and services have recorded a decrease of 16.5% quarter on quarter for first quarter 2018. And imports of goods and services have recorded a decrease of 6.5% quarter on quarter on the first quarter of 2018. Now, let us look at exports growth rates over time. And of course, we can see coming out of the first quarter 2014 to the first quarter of 2018. And as we have already indicated, that we are sitting at a drop of 16.5% in the first quarter of 2018. Now, let us look at imports. We can observe over time how they have behaved. And of course, we have indicated that we have seen a fall of 6.5% in the first quarter of 2018. Now, let us recap. We are saying GDP and the expenditure on GDP growth rates, as we have seen, the trends are almost the same, and we have indicated at the beginning. And the GDP on the production side recorded a negative 2.2 in the first quarter, 2.2% in the first quarter of 2018. And of course, on the expenditure side, negative 2.5 in the first quarter of 2018. Again, as a recap, it's GDP, real GDP, recording a fall of 2.2% in the first quarter of 2018. And of course, that is quarter on quarter, and year on year, 0.8 in the first quarter of 2018.